Westminster Hall, built by William II, son of the Conqueror, has had many uses in its near 1,000-year history. It's been home to some of the most important law courts in the land and witnessed some of the most dramatic and consequential trials in English history. It's been used for rare addresses to both Houses of Parliament and for the lying in state of monarchs or their consorts during state and ceremonial funerals. And it has been used as a place of protest, petitioning, and political display. Scares about a possible invasion from France from 1859 to 1861 even resulted in Westminster Hall being used by volunteer units for military drills and parades. Oh, and like any other gathering place for large crowds, it also attracted traders looking to sell their wares, including books, small items of clothing, and catering to the courts, wigs, and stationery. In 1666, there were 48 stalls in the hall, making it, in effect, an early modern shopping centre. But there is one use we've not mentioned, largely forgotten today despite it being one of the main reasons why kings and lords throughout history have built halls: for feasting. Some of the grandest ceremonial banquets to have ever been held in England took place in Westminster Hall to mark the coronation or crowning of a new monarch. Dating back at least to the coronation feast for Richard I in 1189, the banquet played a major role in the coronation, which has taken place nearby in Westminster Abbey since 1066. The banquet was a prime opportunity for the monarch to demonstrate their magnificence and generosity, and to renew their relationship with his or her leading subjects. It was a huge logistical undertaking. For the banquet of George IV in 1821, the courts and stall holders had to be cleared out from the hall and a new wooden floor laid, 14 inches above the permanent flagstone floor. A raised platform was then erected at the south end of the hall for the King's Table, which was flanked by two-storey boxes, one principally for the members of the royal family, the other for foreign ambassadors. In the centre of the hall, a 19 feet wide space was kept clear for processions, and each side was lined by 7 foot wide tables. Behind these were tiered benches and 2 raised galleries for spectators. Around the north door to the hall was a triumphal arch incorporating a musician's gallery. One of the musicians present at the 1509 banquet is likely to have been the trumpeter John Blank, who probably came to England as one of the African attendants of Catherine of Aragon. In 1821, perhaps the grandest coronation banquet ever held, 336 people ate in the hall itself, with 2,000 more dining elsewhere in the Palace of Westminster. At the King's request, many of those in attendance wore Tudor-style costumes. Together, the guests consumed some 7.3 tons of beef, veal, and lamb, over 1,600 chickens, and 8,400 eggs. Unsurprisingly, given the amount of food being prepared, temporary kitchens had to be specially built for the occasion. In 1821, these were described as comprising 23 rooms of wood and brick, including a roasting kitchen with 16 rows of spits. The preparation and serving of such quantities of food was a huge logistical feat and quite a spectacle in itself. Another moment of spectacle was the throwing down of the gauntlet by the King's champion. First recorded at Richard II's feast, the champion entered the hall on horseback in a suit of armour and threw down a gauntlet, a long, thick glove worn by knights for protection in battle. This was done 3 times, at the north door, in the centre of the hall, and at the foot of the dais, the raised platform for the King's Table. Each time a herald proclaimed that if anyone disputed the King's right to the throne, the champion was ready to call him a liar, traitor, and engage him in combat. Of course, no one ever took up the challenge, and the King would drink to the champion from a golden cup, which he then gave him as his fee. It was probably at this moment that the champion at James II's banquet, bending down to kiss the King's hand, memorably fell off his horse. After the banquet, spectators were allowed to finish off the food and drink, and in 1821 it was only the actions of the Lord Great Chamberlain that prevented the crowds making off with the golden knives, forks, and plates as well. Getting an invite for the coronation banquet was naturally a big deal. Those seated in the hall in 1821 included peers of the realm, bishops, privy councillors, judges, the Lord Mayor and Aldermen of London, the barons of the Cinque Ports, and the Speaker. No women were among them. Tickets for spectators in the hall and the abbey were allocated partly by social rank. Peers received 5 tickets, privy councillors 4, and peeresses 1. The largest number of tickets were at the disposal of the Lord Great Chamberlain and the Earl Marshal, who had 3,000 and 4,000 tickets respectively. It was noted in 1821 that it had not been uncommon for previous Lord Great Chamberlains to sell tickets for enormous prices. Of course, for those among the elite, not being invited was a clear indicator that they had fallen from the king's favour. In 1821, Queen Caroline, George IV's estranged wife and an immensely popular figure, attempted to gain entry to the hall several times but was repeatedly turned away. She fell ill the same evening and tragically died 3 weeks later. Control over who could enter the hall during the banquet tightened over the course of its history. In 1661, Samuel Pepys was able to wander around freely, delightedly observing the event. In 1821, however, fearing disorder, George IV asked for a team of bare-knuckle boxers to act as ushers, checking guests' tickets and controlling admittance. Among these pugilists was Bill Richmond, born enslaved in Richmond Town, New York in 1763, and, though retired by 1821, still one of England's best-known boxers. The banquet was not the only important part of the coronation to be played out in Westminster Hall. From the 14th century until the 17th century, the king would sit on a marble throne at the south end of the hall, where he would be formally elected king by the lords and bishops. While a symbolic gesture, when the throne was contested, as in 1461 and 1483, this act was regarded as being more important than being anointed in the abbey. After their acclamation, the monarch was lifted into a raised seat or throne and presented with the sword of state by nobles and other regalia by the Dean of Westminster Abbey. This was followed by a procession to the abbey for the coronation, an important part of the overall spectacle. Returning to the banquet, it was the extravagance of George IV's coronation, costing the equivalent of £27 million today, that proved to be the undoing of this tradition. Even though the banquet accounted for little more than 10% of the budget, only slightly more than the king's costume, when William IV decided to economise in 1830, it was one of the casualties. While coronation lunches were held in 1911, 37 and 53, these were far less grand occasions, as were the lunches held for French sailors in 1905 to celebrate the signing of the Entente Cordiale, or those for the delegates of the Interparliamentary or Imperial Conferences of 1906 and 1907. The last banquet to be held in the hall was in 1999 to celebrate its 900th anniversary. For all those 900 years, Westminster Hall has been at the heart of the nation's life, witnessing its full share of drama and debate, solemnity and celebration. While other moments have been more consequential, few can compare with the splendour and ceremony of its largely forgotten banquets.